What if I told you that there was a way to effectively budget your money in a way that it doesn't feel like you're becoming a penny pincher? Saving money can feel like such a hurdle and we associate it with sacrifice. And well, in order to save more money, you will have to cut back at some end. But we can do it in a way so that it doesn't feel like it affects our whole life or financial life. And we can do that by applying the 80-20 rule. In case you are not familiar with the 80-20 rule or the 80-20 principle, I will give a quick explanation with a personal example that is unrelated to finance, so it's maybe more relatable. But when you are already familiar with the 80-20 principle, then feel free to skip this section. Now the 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto Principle, because it was first described by Wilfredo Pareto, and it states that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. And that can be applied to so many different areas in life. And the example that I want to give you is in the field of health when I wanted to lose weight. So I tried to apply the 80-20 principle here, and the first kind of like decision I had to make, or the two main levers there are in losing weight are exercise and diet. Now because exercise was already part of my daily routine and I wasn't able to, or to be more accurate, I wasn't willing to do it as excessively I would have needed to, in order to lose weight, because I just didn't want to spend 2 hours or 3 hours each day on exercising. So then I knew, okay, it has to be diet for me. And then I looked at what I ate and I noticed that it was in portions. A normal portion at a restaurant is actually oftentimes too much for me. Either I end up being very full or I take the remaining third or half of it with me to eat it later. And I also knew it wasn't the number of meals because I ate 2 to 3 times a day and I usually don't snack. And I looked at what I ate and I knew it's also not the type of meal I'm having, because I often eat salad and lots of vegetables. I rarely eat pasta, maybe 2 to 3 times a month. And I also very rarely eat fried stuff because I just don't like how I feel after it. And then there was pretty much only one food category left, and that was sweets. I love sweets, and I noticed that sugar is basically the 20% of food I'm eating that determines 80% of the success of me losing weight or not. And then I went a level deeper, although I probably am already at least 80-20 level deeper than from the start. But that's actually the nice thing about the 80-20 principle. You can do it over and over and over again. So I went deeper into sweets. There were gummy bears and candy, which I actually didn't eat that much. And I also noticed that it wasn't really important to me. Also, the fact that there was this gelatin from pigs in gummy bears actually started to creep me out a little bit. I mean, I do eat meat, but imagining that there was something meat-like in my sweets was just weird. So I cut those out completely and I haven't missed them since. Also, I don't drink sodas like ever. I pretty much only drink water or tea, so that wasn't the problem either. Then there was ice cream, and I do like ice cream, but it's totally fine for me to cut down on this one. And now I actually have it, maybe once a month on average. In summer it's a little bit more and in winter it's less. So then what remained was chocolate. And I love chocolate. So now 3-ish levels down of the 80-20 principle, I noticed that chocolate is basically the 20% of food that I eat, of sweets that I eat, that determines the 80% of outcome, so my success of losing weight or not. And then I asked myself, okay, how can I optimize here? Now, I didn't want to cut it out completely out of my life because I stand by it. I love chocolate. But I knew that I had to reduce it. So what I did, I switched to dark chocolate in my everyday life. Dark chocolate has significantly less sugar than milk chocolate. I usually go for the 78% from Lindt, which has 17 grams of sugar in a whole bar. So even if I would eat the whole bar, which I'm actually not capable of because it's very heavy, I would still be under 20 grams of sugar per day. So I still treat myself to milk chocolate because I enjoy it very much, but I reduced it to maybe 4 to 6 days per month. And what I also did, I asked myself, okay, what kind of milk chocolate do I enjoy most? So I don't go to the supermarket and go all out on all of them, and I picked my I don't know, 3 to 5 favorites. And when I buy chocolate, I stick to those. So I hope this explained the Pareto Principle as a concept. Now let's take a look at what this would look like in your finances. By the way, I'm going to do a whole series about this, so stay tuned. Consider subscribing if you want. But today we're going to talk about the budget, about the 80-20 principle in your budget. And for that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze our expenses. We want to find the 20% of things that we spend money on that lead to 80% of our expenses, or maybe rather 80% of our savings potential. And here in expenses, don't take this 20-80 literally, because your actual expenses might look different. See it rather as a concept where we want to find the big levers. Because of course we can compare the prices of blueberries and maybe save $1 or $2, but that's probably not what's going to move the needle in your whole financial situation, and it even might frustrate you, and we want to avoid that. So for this first step, know exactly where your money goes. And usually when I'm talking about a budget, I would probably start with, separating the expenses into different categories. But in this particular case, I would say look at the highest balance of your top 3 to 5 positions first. So in your statement of account, you see the different amounts of money that go off. And now pick the 3 to 5 with the highest amount. For me, this is rent, and after that come insurances. And then when the next highest amount of money is something that is not recurring, so for example, it's a one-time purchase in a supermarket, then it's time to start with the categories. And for this exercise, I recommend the following categories: groceries, so what you buy at the supermarket; going out, and this includes going out to restaurants; takeout, going out to bars, and going out to have coffee. And I recommend to split the two, so not build a category for food, because splitting groceries and eating out can reveal a lot of savings potential. Then I recommend subscriptions and maybe one other category that tends to show up very often in your personal bank balance. Now there might be something where you spend more money on than, let's say, the average person. So to individualize this exercise, I included this, so add your own category. And then the next step is to define the return that these single units have for us. And this means to ask yourself, how important is this really for me? And be brutally honest here. And then you really focus on these top categories that we defined. Now I in this video will combine these 2 points, so figure out how important they are and also how we can save on them. But you can do it in separate steps. So write behind each item what it really means to you and why. And then in the next step, figure out how you can save. And I actually just thought of an exercise that I was doing once when it comes to values. And we were supposed to write all of our values on, these single pieces of paper, so one value at each, and then bring them in an order that is most important to us. So which one goes first, which one goes second, which one goes third, and so on. And to do this in this physical manner, it really intensifies your thinking of what's really important to you. So you can consider this as well when dealing with your categories. And now let's talk about the single categories. As for rent was the biggest position in my account. It probably also is in yours. Now I think this one is actually the hardest to save money on, because in order to move, it's time consuming, it's money consuming, and to be honest, it's also mentally draining. At least it was for me, and I moved I think 6 to 7 times already. So unless you have a house and you feel like maybe renting out your garage in order to bring some extra cash in, I would say it's okay to put this one aside for now. Of course, when you are at a point where housing is 50% of your expenses and you cannot cut back in any of the other categories, then it's something to consider. As for insurance, now in my bank balance, health insurance was the second highest bill. And I actually chose that. I chose to have the best coverage, and of course that's expensive respectively. Now for me personally, to know that my health bills are taken care of no matter where I am in the world is actually priceless, or at least close to priceless. So I will put this one aside myself as well. But the options you do have here is to check if there is a provider, with the same conditions but with a lower price. And because you pay it monthly, this can really pay off to take a second look. Of course, you can also check if it's an insurance you really need, but the ones you don't really need will probably not be, that expensive. Now, if one of your highest payments is your car, you can ask yourself if there is a way to lower them. Of course, the ultimate efficient way would be to get rid of it. That is radical, but sometimes necessary. But before that, you can take a look at other options. In case you are driving a rather new car and you find out that it's also okay for you to drive an older car, then you could just switch, because then you have the difference of the selling price of the new car and the buying price of the old car. Of course, this has to make sense. You might also save on monthly payments for the car. You might save on insurance, because newer cars are more expensive to insure. And depending on the car, you might also save on maintenance and on gas. When you are commuting, maybe there's a chance to do it together with other colleagues in order to save money. You could check if public transportation is actually less expensive. And you can consider to rent out your car in times where you don't need it to have some extra income. When it comes to groceries, they probably are one of your top categories, and that is also fine, because I mean, we do have to eat. If, however, this seems like exceedingly much, what you can do is to look at the single groceries that, again, are the 20% that lead to the 80% of expenses, and see if you actually need it or can find cheaper alternatives. Now, in my experience, everything that is processed is more expensive than to buy, the vegetables and all that stuff in singular. It's also healthier, but also more time consuming. So this one will depend on your individual needs, but also note that, groceries, it's okay if it's a position in our, in our expenses, in our balance. When it comes to going out, we put everything into this one basket going out. Going out to restaurants, getting takeout, and going out for coffee, and going out for bars. Now, if you do notice that this is a huge category in your expenses, you can go down one level with the 80-20 principle and look at each of those, which again are the 20% that lead to the 80%. So then you might notice, okay, I actually went out to a restaurant, I don't know, like 3 times this month. And that's actually, that's fine. But you order takeout like, I don't know, 29 times, then you might discover some savings potential there. And what you can also do is you can look at the balance and find out which restaurant or which, place you got takeout were actually the most expensive. Maybe only 2 to 3 restaurants are the ones that actually drive, the most expenses in this category. And then next time, maybe you can stick to the cheaper ones. Of course, the most radical solution here is to just cook for yourself, because that's almost always less expensive than going out. And I also want to talk about subscriptions, because a single subscription is most of the time just a couple of bucks, but for the average American, they can actually add up to $200 per month. So the first thing here will be to cancel all the ones that you're not using anymore, and there probably will be a handful. Now, the most radical version here would be to cancel all of them and then see which one you really miss, and then you could sign up again. Or if you're, for example, using several streaming services, you can use one for, I don't know, a couple of months, 2 months, 3 months, and then you cancel this one and then you switch to another one if you want to see something new. And what I've also heard somewhere, and I found this interesting, is to do it like a la carte. So if you want to watch a certain movie or a series, you can just buy them or rent them. Of course, you will have to check if this then actually gets more expensive, because that's what we want to avoid. But I can imagine that it adds friction to the process, because you have to click the buy button every time you want to watch something, and that might also lead to you not needing it anymore. So those were the big categories for the vast majority of people. For you, it might have been something different. If you found something surprising, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.